On the 50th floor, the silence was louder than it needed to be. It filled a corner office made of glass and steel, a place that held billions in assets but couldn't hold back a crushing loneliness. Her name was Elena Vance, but most days she was just a title, a signature on a deal. A few blocks away, a different kind of quiet settled over a small house. Not empty, not silent, just quiet. It was the world of Mark, a single dad managing a mountain of grief and a daughter's bedtime stories. His world was made of worn-out storybooks and the echo of a laugh he was terrified he might forget. They were strangers in the same city, separated by everything the world tells you matters. Until one night, in a dimly lit bar, he saw the woman, not the title. And for her, that changed everything. Life's not always what it seems on the surface. If you're curious to see how this extraordinary night unfolds, like the video and hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us share more stories like this. Before the bar, before the anonymous encounter, Elena Vance's world was built on a schedule. The click of her heels on the marble floor was a metronome counting down the minutes of her life. She'd just closed a deal that would make headlines, but the applause in the boardroom had already faded. It was replaced by the profound quiet of her chauffeured car, a quiet that felt heavier than any failure. Success was her cage, and she had built it herself. Instead of going home to the sterile silence of her penthouse, she did something she hadn't done in years. She told the driver to stop. She found herself outside a small, unassuming bar called The Quiet Pint. It wasn't flashy. It smelled of old wood and spilled beer. She took a seat in the back, hoping to disappear. And that's when she saw him. He wasn't trying to be seen. He was nursing a single drink, his shoulders slumped with the weight of a long day. There was a weariness in his eyes, but it was the kind of calm that builds under pressure, like steel forming in a forge. He was Mark. They didn't look for conversation, but it found them. It started with a shared sigh, an unspoken understanding of a day that had taken more than it gave. "Tough one?" he asked. His voice was gentle, not intrusive. Elena, caught off guard, just nodded. The kind that makes you question the road you took. He offered a small, tired smile. "I know that kind of day." They didn't exchange names. They didn't talk about work. The beautiful, freeing anonymity of the bar let them be just two people. He spoke of small, solid things. The ridiculous price of crayons, the challenge of getting a 5-year-old to eat her vegetables. His world was so different, so grounded. Elena found herself listening, truly listening, for the first time in a long time. "My daughter, Lily," he said, and the way his face softened was like watching the sun break through clouds. "She drew a picture of our family today. Me, her, and her mom. With wings. Said Mommy is an angel now." A flicker of profound grief crossed his face, so raw and real it made Elena's chest ache. He was the kind of man who carried a universe of love and loss, and never complained. Elena, the woman who commanded boardrooms, felt her own walls begin to crumble. She spoke not of mergers, but of a dream she once had to be an art historian. She spoke of the loneliness that wealth couldn't fill. He listened without judgment. His gaze was steady, compassionate. For 20 minutes, they weren't a CEO and a struggling father. They were just two people. Then, he glanced at his watch. Babysitter's waiting. He stood, placing a few crumpled bills on the bar. "It was nice talking to you," he said, and then he was gone. He had asked for nothing. He didn't try to impress her. He had simply seen a person having a tough day and offered a moment of connection. For a woman whose life revolved around transactions, this simple, unburdened gift felt more valuable than anything she had ever owned. The next day, the numbers on her screen blurred. The voices of her executives sounded distant. All she could think about was the man from the bar. She thought about the sadness in his eyes and the love in his voice when he spoke of his daughter. He had given her a glimpse of a world that felt more real than her own, and she desperately wanted to see it again. Her logical CEO brain told her to let it go. It was a random encounter. It meant nothing. But a part of her she hadn't listened to in years refused to give up. That evening, she went back to the Quiet Pint. He wasn't there. She went back the next night and the night after. She clung to the few details he had shared. His daughter Lily was 5. A specific brand of organic juice boxes that only one small market in the area seemed to stock. It was a long shot, a ridiculous idea. but it was all she had. The next Saturday, instead of reviewing reports, Elena Vance, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, walked through the aisles of a small family-run grocery store. She felt out of place in her designer clothes, her eyes scanning for the juice boxes. And then, in the produce aisle, she saw him. He was with his daughter, a little girl with bright, curious eyes holding a bunch of carrots like a royal scepter. Mark looked different in the daylight. The weariness was still there, but it was overshadowed by the clear, unconditional love he had for his child. He was laughing at something she said, a sound so genuine it made Elena's heart skip a beat. She almost turned around. This was his world. She was an intruder. But then Lily dropped her carrots. They rolled across the floor, stopping at Elena's feet. Lily looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Elena bent down, gathered the carrots, and handed them back. "I think you dropped these," she said softly. Mark looked over. His eyes widened in recognition. "You," he started, surprised. "The woman from the bar." "Elena," she said, finally giving him her name. "Mark," he replied, a slow smile spreading across his face. "And this is Lily." The air was thick with the awkwardness of two strangers who had shared their deepest feelings now facing each other under harsh fluorescent lights. But Lily, with the simple wisdom of a child, broke the tension. "Are you my daddy's friend?" Elena smiled, a real smile this time. "I'd like to be," she said, looking at Mark. They ended up talking for an hour, right there in the grocery aisle. He told her more about his wife Sarah, about the void she'd left behind. He spoke of the daily struggle, not just with money, but with the fear of not being enough for Lily. Elena found herself opening up in a way she never had. She told him about the betrayals, the pressure, and the gnawing feeling that she had built a magnificent cage for herself. They were from two different planets, yet they spoke the same language of loss and loneliness. He saw past her expensive clothes, and she saw past his weary exterior to the devoted father doing his absolute best. In that small grocery store, they began the slow, delicate process of building a bridge between their worlds. Their meetings became a regular thing. Coffee at a park while Lily played on the swings, walks along the river. For Mark, Elena's friendship was a lifeline. For Elena, Mark and Lily were an anchor to a world that was messy, but beautifully real. She started leaving the office at a reasonable hour. She was rediscovering the woman she was before the title defined her. The true test came at her company's annual charity gala, a lavish affair filled with louder voices and shinier shoes. This year, she wanted it to be different. She asked Mark to be her guest. He was hesitant. "Elena, look at me," he said. "I don't belong in that world. I don't have a tuxedo." "You don't have to talk to them," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "Just talk to me. I want my friend there with me." When he arrived in a rented tuxedo, he looked handsome, but deeply uncomfortable. All around them, people whispered, their eyes flicking from the powerful Elena Vance to the unknown man at her side. They saw his simple watch, his nervous posture, and they dismissed him. But Elena was different. She kept a hand on his arm, a small grounding gesture. She introduced him not with a title, but with simple dignity. "This is my friend, Mark," she would say, her voice clear and proud. The highlight of the evening was her speech. Everyone expected her to talk about profits. Instead, she stood at the podium and looked directly at Mark. "For years," she began, "I have measured success in dollars and stock points. I believed that building an empire was the most important thing a person could do. I was wrong." A murmur went through the crowd. "Success isn't about the name on a building," she continued. "It's about human connection. It's about showing up for people. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable." I was reminded of that recently by a friend, a man who, despite facing a loss I cannot imagine, has built an empire of love for his daughter. An empire far more valuable than anything I have ever built. Everyone followed her gaze to Mark. In that moment, he wasn't an outsider. He was the focus of everyone's admiration, not for what he had, but for who he was. He watched her, a slow smile spreading across his face, feeling a swell of something he thought he'd never feel again: hope. They left the gala early, hand in hand, leaving the world of glass and steel behind. What mattered was the quiet understanding that passed between them. Her world hadn't swallowed him. His world hadn't been a temporary escape. Instead, they had built something new. A few weeks later, Elena stood in Mark's small kitchen. She was helping Lily frost a lopsided cake, getting more frosting on her nose than on the dessert. Mark was at the stove, humming off-key. He looked over at Elena, her face lit up with a joy he'd never seen in a business magazine. She caught his eye, and in that shared glance, a silent promise was made. This was their new beginning. Not a fairy tale rescue, but a real-life partnership built on small, solid things. On the 50th floor, she was still a CEO. In his small apartment, he was still a single dad. But together, they were just Elena and Mark. Two people who had been lost until they found their way, not by looking up at the skyline, but by finally looking at each other. They had found that true wealth isn't measured in what you own, but in the hands you have to hold. And for the first time in a very long time, neither of them was afraid of falling,